All right, everyone. Welcome back to the stage. I hope everybody here is comfortable after a long day at ChangeNOW. I think it's already the afternoon, but we still have a very interesting session prepared for you. So I suggest you get comfortable in your chair, get moving a little bit to wake up after a long day, and we'll get started. Now, all of us here at ChangeNOW, I think we're here because we want change, and still we're in a very comfortable environment here. We're in a conference in the middle of Paris, next to the Eiffel Tower, and as much as we talk about crisis, we talk about the climate crisis, and it is affecting us here, it is important that we really zoom in on what crisis actually means. And that's what we do during the session today. I'm very excited today to have some amazing activists, science leaders talking about what crisis actually means. And then more importantly, how can we look at the range of crises that we have in the world, either through a perspective of the polycrisis. I think some of you who has heard of the term polycrisis. You know, I'm not going to do an academic introduction, but it's basically the point of different crises being interconnected, the importance of us looking at different crises such as climate change, the Ukraine war, the Middle East war, global refugee crisis. We can name many, many more, being interconnected, and for the importance to look at holistic solutions. But if we look at even just one crisis at a time, we realize how complex each of them is, right? So it's a big challenge to try to draw the connections, and we'll take on that challenge during the session. To start off, I'm very excited to welcome our keynote speaker. She can't be here in person, unfortunately, today, but we're dialing her in online on the screen, so you'll be able to watch her keynote in a second. I'm very excited to welcome Fatou Jeng. She is a climate advisor to the United Nations Secretary General, and she's also the founder of Clean Earth Gambia, which is a non-profit organization creating awareness around climate change, educating school children, and running projects around climate change. I'm very excited to hand over to Fatou and let us introduce this session. All right, see you soon.
Hello, good evening, good afternoon. Rather unfortunate that I can't make it to the session today, speaking on a very important and crucial topic. Obviously, you know, these are the things that comes with having a global South passport, you know, passport constraint, visa constraints and all. But I'm really glad to join you virtually in this session, navigating through the times of polycrisis. As mentioned by the moderator, my name is Fatou Jeng. I am from the Gambia, one of the climate advisors to the UN Secretary General, and also founded Clean Earth Gambia, which is one of the biggest youth-led environmental organizations working on the intersection of gender, climate change awareness, among others. To begin with, I think the term polycrisis obviously speaks for itself, because in our present generation, or right now, we're seeing intersecting on multiple crises that are actually happening around the world, which are affecting the lives and livelihoods of people, but most especially the climate crisis, which over the years we have been seeing the devastating impacts it have been able to have on the lives of people, especially people from the global south. I am from the Gambia, as mentioned by the moderator, and it's a country, tiny country with just less than 3 million people. But we are one of the countries that is experiencing the major impacts of climate change as a result, obviously, of the increase in global climate threats that are caused by the major polluters. And as a country, the Gambia, we are very vulnerable and at the risk of rising sea level. And the scientists have mentioned that if our sea level in the Gambia rises for 1 meter, the city will be inundated. And also, looking at how our country is mainly dependent on agriculture as our main source of sustenance, especially as a country where over 70% of our rural population depend on agriculture, include father who's a farmer. And over the years, we have been seeing how the polycrisis or intersecting global crisis, ranging from biodiversity loss, from flooding, from economic loss, from social inequality, among others, have been really affecting our lives and our livelihoods as people. And just to take you or give you a breakdown of how this is really significant, or how this is really majorly impacting people and their lives. For instance, in our side of Africa, that is the Sahel, we have been experiencing an increased in conflict, especially conflicts between farmers and herders as they actually scramble or fight for the inadequate resources that we have, looking at how this side of our world is actually or has been experiencing drought as a result of the climate crisis, which is also leading to other humanitarian problems that is war and conflicts in these areas, as well as poverty. We also go and look at other sides of Africa, like Sierra Leone, among others. We have been seeing how there have been an increase in flooding affecting and leading to the death of so many. Even in the Gambia of recent, that is the last climate season, the last rainy season, over hundreds of families were displaced and they lost their lives and their livelihoods. And this is something that is similar across other parts of Africa. And also, if you look at other parts of the global south, like Pakistan, among others, we have been seeing how there has been an increase in flooding, which has been affecting the main source of income and livelihoods of people. So when we talk about navigating the polycrisis, it is about understanding how the different challenges that we're facing around the world intersect with each other, and how it is also affecting the lives of people and their main source of income and just their livelihoods in general. I mean, the moderator has actually talked about the issue of the humanitarian crisis that are happening. We now look at the war and the genocide that is happening in Gaza. We look at uh, in Congo and Sudan, how children and young people are actually abused. We look at other parts of the world where we're seeing gender inequality. We're seeing other several challenges that continue to affect our lives and our livelihoods. So, what do we need to do? As not only activists, as not only individuals that are working against the global crisis that we continue to face. First, I think it is really important that we continue to strengthen global cooperation and knowledge sharing. Conferences and events like Change Now are avenues that are very crucial for us to ensure that there is knowledge sharing, where people from the global south, where indigenous communities, where the academia, where the activists and all other stakeholders converge, come together to discuss about the polycrisis, the different challenges that we're facing on a daily basis, and the important and significant role that every stakeholder has in making sure that we address these problems that we are facing. Obviously, the second thing, financing, but most especially the angle of climate financing, because now we're seeing how climate change has also caused other humanitarian and social issues. We're seeing biodiversity loss, we're seeing hunger, we're seeing all the other challenges that come with the climate crisis. So we need to make sure that we invest more in climate financing. And when I talk about climate finance, we need to make sure that polluted nations that are actually causing the major damages in continents and places that are affected by the climate crisis invest more on climate financing, especially on the loss and damage. If some of you have been following the UNFCCC process, you've seen that during the last COP, that was the COP28, we talked about the loss and damage fund. And in the previous COPs, we've talked about the issue of climate financing for adaptation and loss and damage. But these haven't really actually progressed much as we needed. So that is why in the time of navigating the polycrisis, we need to make sure we invest more in climate financing. I mean, serious climate financing, where countries can be able to build their adaptation capacities. We've seen how countries like Kiribati cannot be able to actually support themselves in the face of climate crisis. Countries like Fiji, because these are countries that are adversely affected by rising sea level, and some of the citizens are actually forced to actually migrate because they are losing their lands. So when we talk about climate financing, we're making sure that there is enough support to make sure that countries that are vulnerable to the climate crisis, as well as other challenges that come with the climate crisis, are supported. obviously making sure that our solutions in addressing the polycrisis is as inclusive as possible, making sure that we bring the right people at the right place to make sure that we find a common ground and common solution. For instance, we continue to see how in some platforms, indigenous communities are tokenized, young people are tokenized, and this is what we need to do away with. We need to make sure that we have inclusive solutions where the local knowledge of indigenous communities, the local knowledge of traditional people are incorporated in the solutions that we are going to bring forward in addressing the challenges that we face. Obviously, and most importantly, we need to make sure that we invest more in research, investing more in research in making sure that we are finding more solutions in addressing the problems that we face. That's why obviously it's really important that the next panel that we're having, we have someone focused in research, and I really love to hear his perspective in making sure that there is more investment and there is more focus on research in climate related issues. Finally, to just wrap it up, I'll obviously share my call for action, because in as much as we sit in platforms, we talk about the challenges that we are facing, we talk about the problems that we continue to face on a daily basis as a result of climate change, as well as other intersecting challenges. We need to make sure that obviously there is accountability and there is transparency in the processes. We don't only sit in these platforms and talk about the challenge we face, but we make sure that when we're leaving these platforms, we are bringing in innovative solutions that are going to solve the problems that are that communities and people in the most marginalized and vulnerable places are actually facing. So these solutions need to make sure that the is considering and making sure that it is including these problems. So first of all, on my issue of calling to action, obviously, we need to make sure that we take urgent actions and making sure that we bring all stakeholders involved. There has been so much talks, there has been so much backs and forth in the climate space, in the environment space, in the humanitarian space, but I haven't seen enough action that needs to be taken. So we need to make sure that in making sure there's transparency and accountability, we need to make sure that these actions are taken urgently and making sure that we hold our leaders accountable for the promises that we are making in not only the international stage but also at the national stage, making sure that these promises that are made and pledges that are made are actually committed to and implemented at our local level where it matters the most, because it is in our local levels where people are affected. So when we make sure we take urgent actions, we need to make sure that it is considering the needs, the aspirations, and the desires of the communities that are most vulnerable and most affected. And obviously, partnership, collaboration, as I've mentioned, is very crucial in moving forward, because as I always say in my panels or in my conversations, that the government can't do it alone, young people can't do it alone, academia can't do it alone. So we need different stakeholders involved, where we are bringing or we are utilizing our existing skills and knowledge to make sure we are synergizing effort to address the challenges that we continue to face on a daily basis. So making sure that there is effective partnership between different stakeholders will help us in moving forward or navigating the polycrisis, and obviously accelerating transition to a just society. And when I talk about just society, I'm talking about environmental justice, climate justice, social justice, democracy, and the rule of law. We cannot talk about addressing only the climate crisis and leaving all the challenges that we are facing, because all these things actually more or less affect each other. So if we do not solve the social justice problems that we are facing, it will be difficult to solve the climate problems that we are facing. So making sure that in the approaches or the ways that we are using to address the problems, we need to make sure that we are using a social justice angle, a social justice lens, where we are making sure that we are addressing all the problems. For instance, in places like the Gambia and all of that, we are seeing poverty, we are seeing the violation of the fundamental human rights of women, among others, and this is similar to other parts of our globe and all of that. So we need to make sure that when we are addressing the problems, we don't only look at one issue but solve everything. We cannot talk about social justice without talking about the conflicts that are happening in Gaza, in Congo, in Sudan, among others. So we need to make sure that, and in our transition to a just society, we are making sure that it is, you know, ensuring that it is inclusive and it is making sure that it is addressing all the other societal issues that we're having. And finally, we need to make sure that we invest more in research. We need to make sure we invest more in nature-based solutions and climate financing, among others. So to wrap it up, I just really want to appreciate and thank the organizers for having me on board to talk about navigating through the times of polycrisis. This is something that I think we need to have more conversations on, because different issues are happening at the same time. And as I've mentioned, we need to make sure that we're taking a holistic approach in ensuring that we address the problems that we are facing. And I'm actually looking forward to the conversations that will be happening later on with the panel, especially in ensuring that we hear more from the diverse voices of people that are on the ground, that are taking innovative actions, that are taking innovative solutions, and addressing the climate problems as well as other environmental related problems that we continue to see on a daily basis. And also to make sure that there are more platforms where young people from the global south continue to share their work, to share the solutions that they are using or that they're making in their countries to support and build the resilience of communities in adapting to the climate crisis as well as other challenges. And also obviously making sure that there is more global commitment, there is more global action in ensuring that there is collective effort in advancing and pushing for not only climate justice, not only environmental justice, but social justice. Thank you so much.
Fatou, thank you for the keynote and setting the scene towards action, which I want to focus on our next panel, on not just what the action that our panelists are taking, but also what we all in the room can take away from this. And we have two very impactful people joining me for this panel, doing different work, but we'll look for the connections and how everything is interrelated. I'm very excited to welcome to stage Heela Yoon, the founder and CEO of Afghanistan Youth Ambassadors for Peace, and Alain Schuhl, Deputy CEO for Science at CNRS. Welcome to the stage. Yeah, you can applaud again, no worries. Thank you both, welcome. All right, brief intro, and I'd like to introduce you briefly each. Tell us a bit about your work and how it relates to the topic that we're talking about. And we'll get into it. We'll talk about the action that you already take, but also the action that people in the audience can take. And we'll start with you, Heela. So Heela is the founder and CEO of Afghan Youth Ambassadors for Peace. She's an activist from Afghanistan, actually left Afghanistan about 2 years ago, after the Taliban took over again and made the work that she's doing very difficult to do, but still keeps on doing the work with people on the ground while also living in the UK at the moment. She's trained hundreds of young girls across especially the eastern provinces of Afghanistan, got involved in peace building, especially women's rights, girls' rights. We'll talk about what that specifically entails. And also climate change. So let's start with that, Heela. Just tell us a bit more about your work and how does it relate to this term of polycrisis? Tell us a bit more about that. I think maybe specifically with Afghanistan is probably one of the countries that in the world that's been really dealing with crisis for one of the longest times through the last decade. So give us your perspective.
Thank you. Can you still hear me? So before I got the invite to this conference, I usually do consultation with my members on the ground. So I was like, I'm invited to this fancy conference happening in Paris near the Eiffel Tower. So what key messages do you want me to bring to people attending this? And I've been to many of these conferences before as well. And I always wonder, people and activists coming from the global south or from conflict zone, we share our stories, but mostly when we come to a conference like this, is not a criticism to the conference, but most of the time when we share our stories, most of the time the policymakers are not even attending the youth panels. So I can talk more about my work, but I'm not going to go into the technical jargon a lot because throughout 2 days or 3 days, we've been hearing about what changes we're bringing, what we need to do. And I think sometimes we do the same repetitive talks all over and all over again. Why I'm here, I want to bring the stories of people on the ground who are the real victims, who don't have access to these platforms at all. And one of the examples is our keynote speaker who couldn't make it to Paris because of visa discrimination. And I want to, before I start talking about more of my work, I do want to say that we should acknowledge passport privileges and discriminations most of activists face when accessing these platforms. When you talk about global crisis, when you talk about polycrisis, and there's crisis going on everywhere, and what I've been noticing throughout attending so many of these conferences is a lot of us are becoming so normalized to what's happening in Gaza, to what's happening in Sudan, to what's happening in Afghanistan, and many countries others. I can talk about climate change, and I can talk about the issues of what we're doing in Afghanistan, but I do want to add the story element to it. I want to bring the messages of the people on the ground who are suffering. They don't know about these terms, polycrisis. They don't know about what climate change is. They don't know anything. They're on survival mode 24/7. So I want to talk about those initiatives here today. And at the end of this conference, I want to talk about 3 actions that you can take as an individual, not related to your title, not as a policymaker, not as a founder of an organization, not as an entrepreneur, but everyone who have the privilege to attend this conference, including the volunteers in this conference. Take every decision that you make that will be impactful, but take it with responsibility. There are people dying in different countries. There are people who don't have anything on a daily basis who have to think about being alive the next day. But we're here, and we should acknowledge our privileges, not to be on our phone 24/7 when panelists are talking, or like, do use your networking wisely here. Like I said, not everyone have the privilege to attend these conferences. I don't want to take a lot of time, Michael, because I do want to wrap it up quickly, but to just talk about our work, we started our organization, Afghan Youth Ambassador for Peace, because why we added peace? Because in Afghanistan, if you know about it, when you talk about polycrisis, Afghanistan is a perfect example here. We have crisis coming for most 4 decades. Girls have been denied access to education for more than 2 years. Climate crises are happening. We don't have basic infrastructure. 20 years, many countries came into our country, spent billions of money, and we don't even have basic infrastructure at the moment. Women don't have access to any healthcare. So why are we doing the things we're doing right now in Afghanistan? My parents were both survival of civil war in Afghanistan, so peace means a lot to me. I'm survival of as well of many terrorist attacks that happened in Afghanistan that didn't prevent us from continuing our education. There are many things happening in Afghanistan, and right now when we started our organization, we wanted to focus at the grassroots level because change starts from the grassroots level. At the end of the day, I want to talk to most of policymakers, and the message is always have a top-to-bottom, bottom-to-top approach when it comes to dealing with polycrisis or any crisis in any country. Let me give one example before we move to next question. We talk about polycrisis, we talk about climate change. From yesterday, we've been talking about different solutions, different bringing AI or different technology to even solve the basic solution. What we can do, just fix the basic things first, and then we can go to these fancy words and talk about fancy technology. There are so many countries that doesn't have basic infrastructure, and money comes to those countries without accessing the real grassroots leaders on the ground who are making change. So when we started this organization, our focus was to give time and give platform to grassroots organizations and activists who can come to this platform and speak about the realities on the ground. And I will talk more about our work throughout the session.
We'll dive into your specific work and your actions as well. We'll get Alain to introduce himself a little bit as well. I'll give you a brief overview. So Alain, you're the Deputy CEO for Science at CNRS. Anybody that's French, I assume you probably are familiar with it. If you're not familiar with it, it's really one of the leading institutions worldwide of scientific research. France's National Institute for Scientific Research. I think you have about 30,000 people affiliated with CNRS, and really responsible for a wide range of research around climate change and a whole range of research that I'll let you talk about. And what I learned actually in preparing for this is that out of CNRS, there is 100 startups launched every year that actually translate the research into action. And so far, that's been 1,400 startups created from that. That's obviously just one aspect, and we can talk about more than that. But Alain, tell us about how your work relates to this term polycrisis, how it affects you, and what your work looks like. Has it changed? You've been a pretty established institution. Has it changed at all in the last few years?
First of all, I am very happy to be here, and I think science. I try to show you that if we want to navigate in time of polycrisis, you need a compass, and science could be this compass. Second thing I wanted to do, it's very difficult to take the floor after such a testimony because you are in urgence and things are quite complicated. But we are in short time and we are working at long time just to put solution. If we look to polycrisis, why polycrisis? Because each crisis today, with the interconnected world, has an effect. If you take the Ukrainian war, you have immediate effect on supply, energy supply in Europe or water supply in Middle East. You have a lot of impact and things like that. And we really believe that, for example, if you take the COVID pandemic crisis, we trust to travel. We really believe that the position of science is to be part of the solution and to give aspect. And for example, why I speak about long time? Just because we had a quick discovery of vaccine for the pandemic. And why we did have this quick discovery of vaccine is just because 60 years ago, there will be work in a French laboratory by Jacques Monod, who discovered the messenger RNA. And so since we know the messenger RNA, we were able to discover the. So we need this long time research just to give a solution, to help, and to help to adapt also to the crisis. And
I want to follow up with a question, maybe bring in something that Heela brought up as well, and maybe challenge and ask you on that. I mentioned, you have all these startups coming out. That already shows me that you're probably not in such an ivory tower that you're not just sitting in a corner doing a bunch of research that doesn't get applied to the real world. But we have the point of obviously global crises. We have the situation in Afghanistan, Ukraine, Middle East, etc. We can increase the list. How do you even weave that into your research, into your work on trying to solve problems holistically rather than looking at it just from the micro focus on one specific issue?
Okay, I mean, we have to do both, to look at each micro crisis and to look globally at the polycrisis system. And that's the force of the CNRS, just because we have all the science. And when I speak all the science, it's eventually mathematics, physics, chemistry, but also biology, but also social science, but also economics, but also political science, but also ecology. Well, all the panel of science, and we're able to put all these experts together to help us to find a solution. And if you told that we're not so bad, we're on an excellence level, it's just because if you look at, for example, where there is 24 Nobel Prize, we were a member of CNRS, we have 14 field medal, but we are doing fundamental research, but we want to put this fundamental research at the service of the society. And that's why we are creating this number 100 startups each year. And for example, we had a presentation this morning of one of these startups, Aldoria, on the FL stage, which is working on the clean space, and we're working on that. Today we have also about 80 startups working on the sustainable agriculture. And just by helping this starting creation, we also we believe that we will be able to help the society.
Got it. Heela, what's your point of view on that? Like, what will be your challenge to Alain, maybe on the work that they're doing? Do you think that on the ground in Afghanistan or in other crises, that's actually the solutions that they are developing are actually arriving, or how would you react to that?
I think coming from my experience, I think most of the things, whether it's startups or policymakers, when it comes to dealing with issue of climate change, gender equality, or human rights, we have like this white and black perspective, but never look at the gray areas. So in a lot of countries, like I said, we do a lot of research, but it's mostly built on the sample of one country, and then we implement that in another country, which is not working. And that's something we should consider as well. And most of the time, a lot of people these days are really reactive rather than proactive when it comes to solutions like global crisis or polycrisis or climate issues. I think sometimes when we come to these conferences, we only have these access about the progress that have been made, or people are working on different initiatives, 80 startups are doing this. But one thing we need to notice why this is not reaching out to the grassroots level where war and conflict is happening. I know war is something that might prevent a lot of these startups to go in, but there's a lot of changes that these startups can do in terms of making systematic change in conflict zone as well. And that's why I always advocate when we want to change in one country, we need to have a collaborative approach to work in other countries at the same time. You can't solve climate crisis in the Western country and leave the global South complete. It's going to impact each other. So it's really important when we're doing these research, we need to understand where the gaps in these research are as well. If it's not being implemented, why is it not being implemented? Where are we lacking? Is it 2024 and we're still talking about solution, but we already have the solution. We're just not implementing those solutions. We're doing the same policy. We're drafting the same policy paper. We're drafting the same research paper again and again. You're doing repetitive work, but what we're lacking is implementation and accountability. And these are the two things that we should be focusing more on. Why accountability is lacking, why implementation is lacking when it comes to implementing either scientific research or policy making or anything related to polycrisis or preventing these crises.
Anything on that? Some applause, there we go. Anything on that in terms of how would you respond to that, on how how you can not just develop solutions, obviously here in France with CNRS, but also integrate international perspectives and people on the ground that are far away from the scientific research that your organization does.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to say that what I said that CNRS is working on all the field. We have lab working on Afghanistan. I mean, we have lab. We have the Center for Sociology and Political Science, which is working since 50 years in Afghanistan and political science. We have people who are working on law and in Afghanistan, and we just wrote a book about the Taliban government. So that's the first point. I don't remember.
Yeah. So I mean, maybe following up on that, right? You have an institute since the 60s that's also looking at the crisis in Afghanistan. I mean, Afghanistan has really been in crisis pretty much for decades. But yet we're still in that situation, right? So what do we need to change?
Yes, okay. No, I just want to follow my first answer. That we are also an international organization. We have more than 100. We have about 100 labs all over in the world, in 50 countries. We are in 50 countries, and we are working with all the scientific of the world, just to find to look at the crisis also, and to find find solution or to that's the point where we are working at. For example, if I took what I will call the biggest crisis, or maybe the mother of the crisis, which is the climate change. I mean, today because the climate change will have a lot of crises, like migration crisis, like war crisis, and things like that. It's more than 40 years that the scientific try to explain that there is a climate change and will have problems. And now we are here. We are in. And so what of our world? The science is not the solution. The science can be part of the solution. In the way that we put the knowledge, we put the science, the research, the result of our research to our politicians, just for them to make and to take the right decisions.
Got it. Well, we'll talk about that. You brought up, obviously, climate crisis as the mother of all crises, and we'll talk about that. Heela, what's your perspective on that? Afghanistan is already affected by climate change. Would you describe it as the mother of all crises with all the crises that your country has dealt with, or what's your perspective on it?
I think if you go to Afghanistan and ask an average person what climate crisis is, they'll probably laugh at you. They don't know the term what climate crisis is. They know how it affects them, but they don't know. I think The issue is it comes back down to education. Like, you will only know about climate crisis or what's the solution or when you have access to education. So in most conflict-affected countries, let's talk about how people are getting information about climate crisis. A lot of people don't even believe in climate crisis in these countries because lack of education. So if you talk about countries like Afghanistan, so 2 years access to education for girls is completely banned. So half of the generation is not even, half of the population is not even educated. So that will have an impact, like multiplier impact on the future generation. Then the second issue is, one is lack of education, and second is lack of quality education as well. We don't have science labs in Afghanistan or even basic infrastructure to talk about climate issues. Third is, like, if you're in a conflict-affected countries, if you're always on survival mode, if you're worried about what's going to happen to you the next day, people wouldn't care about learning about these things, what climate crisis is, how it's affecting. Let me tell you a personal story. When we started working in Afghanistan, we were working about raising issues about climate crisis, how it's affecting, and we were linking climate crisis to gender-based violence in Afghanistan. Because in Afghanistan, whenever there was flood coming, there was a lot of the percentage of domestic cases of violence against women was increasing. And we went to this village, we talked about climate crisis, how it's impacting. One of the lady came to us, said, like, I don't care about these fancy terms. What I care about, I don't have meal for my kids the next day. So it's really important when we talk about these issues, education is important, the root causes are important. We can, like what Alain says, the scientific solution is part of the solution, it's not the whole solution. Having a holistic approach to it and individual responsibility when it comes to tackling climate crisis is the key, and understanding why certain countries don't even know the term climate crisis, and why this is happening in countries like Afghanistan. There is lack of education, lack of infrastructure, there is conflict going on. So there are plenty of reasons I can give why climate crisis is an issue in Afghanistan, but just people don't have enough awareness about it.
Now, I'm going to put a challenge to both of us, or all the three of us and both of you. Is, again, I started the session saying we're sitting in our comfortable seats here and, we're talking about polycrisis. We just established that even talking about climate crisis in certain situations where, we're going to have a speaker from Ukraine in a second. We have the war in the Middle East and Gaza. If you talk to people about the climate crisis, they have like immediate needs that need to be fixed, right? What's even, should we even be like talking about the polycrisis? Should we be looking at that? Shouldn't we just like start by solving specific issues? Or can the specific issues only be solved by looking at all of the issues and making the connections? Who wants to start on that?
What a question. Okay, so you have special issues which are crises and which need urgent solutions, which are of the terms, which are the solutions which we have to be taken by a politician. So that's the point. We are doing research. We are doing research. We are trying to increase the level of knowledge, increase the certitude, and in that way we really can put, like I said, to help these politicians with putting a compass, just putting them the knowledge we have, and then to help them to take the good solution. And also we are also working to the long term, just to be sure that, and I am sure that looking for the climate crisis, which may be not important for in some local crisis now, that will be very important for everywhere in the world in the near future. I mean, that will increase the number of wars, that will increase the problem of migration and things like that. So each person has been to be at his place. We are doing research. We put the result of research to the society just to help the society to navigate in this term, which are very complicated, and which will be more complicated each day. I mean.
Got it. Now we have about 3 minutes left for this session, so I want to make sure that we talk about a bit about action as well. So Heela, you're taking action every day with your organization. Maybe you can bring some examples in, but then also share what people in the room can do to not just talk about the polycrisis and agree on everything that we just said and go home.
Just coming to the previous question, I'll just briefly explain that. when you talk about so many of these things, you do get overwhelmed, like which crisis to tackle first. And I think from my experience, adaptive management and collaboration is really important with every stakeholders. I think right now what we're doing handling crisis is either your job or my job. You do this and I'll do this. So instead of doing that, having a collaborative approach and adaptive management to crisis is really important. And that's why I want to come to the action points, why this is such an important thing. So at this conferences, usually we target policymakers and change makers, because most of the time they're not even present here because they have their own exclusive events happening. So don't even listen to young people bringing these solutions or these problems. But I want to target those who are here in your individual basis. You either volunteer, you're a student, what you can do to like take every small action in order to make change. First of all, increase your awareness, not just look at everything as just black and white. When you're meeting people from conflict zone who are tackling climate issues, you often see them as people who are resilient, but please acknowledge that resilience is not always a choice. Not many of us needs to be resilient. So the problem and the conflict and the people and the issues that we're facing is not by choice either. So climate crisis in Afghanistan is really different comparing to climate crisis in Paris. So raise your awareness. And at the last action point would be, you will do a lot of networking here. But instead of just taking selfie or Instagram post or just tweeting, make sure you have one impactful action that you can take in order to help people in the global south. You can donate to grassroots organizations who are working at in the conflict zone. That small donation can help a lot of people on the ground. Do that as individually. You don't need to wait for big organizations like UN or USAID or UNDP to fund these grassroots organizations. Take individual responsibility at the end of the day if you're leaving this conference.
Thank you. That deserves an applause, yeah. Alain, any words to add to that on actions to take other than joining CNRS and advancing research? Anything else that people in the audience can do to be part of the solution?
Okay, so we want to be part of the solution. I think really, really believe in innovation. Innovation, and by innovation, I said we are helping by the creation of startups, and a lot of startups are also to help many of the crises we're facing. Many of the crises we're facing. So I spoke about agriculture. I can speak about a lot of things like that. And also, I come back to the fact that we have to adapt to the climate change which are coming up, which is really very important. And in that way, there is the IPCC. I said what we call the GIEC in France, IPCC, and we put the state of the knowledge and the state of the fact that there will be an increase of the temperature in the world in the future. And I just want to say that the CNRS is the biggest contributor to the IPCC in the world by the number of experts, by the number of publications we put on that.
Thank you so much for making the time, for coming here, for taking action every day in your work. And I hope it inspired everybody here in the audience as well to take action. Thank you so much to both of you. All right, we'll go straight up into our next session as part of the same topic here of navigating the Polycrisis. And I'm very excited to welcome Oleksandr Kobzarev. He's the Chief Executive Officer of UNBROKEN. Welcome to the stage. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you so much for coming here. You know, we talked a lot about crisis. We're going to talk about one more crisis that's been going on for way longer than any of us wish. And I think to start with that, we'll look at a video that you brought about your work and the situation in Ukraine. So if we can play that video, and then we'll go into our fireside chat.
What is courage? To look in the mirror. What is strength? To find a foothold. What is victory? To feel the wind. What is freedom? To fly underwater. This is their new start. New history.
Тепер у мене червоний пояс.
Я продовжую танцювати.
Я почала бігати.
Я батько.
New life.
All right. So this already shows some of your work, but give us a bit of an introduction of the work that Unbroken does in this country that's under war, and how you help people that are affected by the war, that are losing limbs over the war, and all these things that we've just seen. Tell us a bit more about Unbroken and the situation in Ukraine right now.
Yeah, you saw the story of our 4 heroes, and the war tragically changed the trajectory of their lives. And each of them was on the very bottom, on the point when they didn't know how to live on. What is our mission is change that. It's give new trajectory. It's help them to set new goals, to give them hope, to give them new opportunities. That is our mission. How we do that? Treatment, prosthetics, rehabilitation, reintegration. That's how we do it. We created in Lviv whole ecosystem, connected projects with each other, which make each other stronger. We call it ecosystem of humanity. We call it Unbroken. It wasn't smart from the very beginning. It's exactly Polycrisis teach us how to do step by step, having one crisis after another. We start from having 5 million IDPs passing our cities. It's huge crisis. People were everywhere, in every school, in every sport gym, in every cultural building. We had so many refugees. So we start to build housing for IDPs. We accept from the beginning of war 16,000 wounded people. 2,000 of them are children. So we rebuilt our medical system to concentrate on the wounded. On the very beginning, we understand that it's not just enough to save their lives, it's a high demand on prosthetics. So we start with very small prosthetics workshop. It was about 40 square meters. Then it became bigger, 400 square meters. Now we are constructing building, separate building, 1,000 square meters, which will be new prosthetics workshop. Also, in the very beginning, we understood that rehabilitation is essential, because it's not just enough just help people with immediate urgent things. You need to teach them how to live longer, how to live better. So we reconstruct building 7 floors. It was old polyclinic and made it modern rehabilitation center. But demand is still so high that we reconstruct another part of this building. We're adding more floors to have more capacity, and we're going to reconstruct 2 more separate buildings to increase this capacity even more. So our goal is to the end of this year have our capacity rise from 6,000 people per year to 10,000 people per year. But it's also not enough. We meet people with physical wounds, we meet people with mental wounds, and we understood that you should care about them together, not separately. So that's how we started our mental health center. And this example is just ideal one, because it shows not only good result for mental health, but also influenced physical recovery. Some people recover faster because of better motivation, new goals, better attitude. So it was so successful that we're going to build 2 additional mental health centers. One is a copy of existing one, and second one is for those who survive tortures and captivity, because it's absolutely another case. So that's how we move slowly, step by step. But this is also not enough. We have not wounded, we have veterans. Myself, for example, I also came from war, who need psychological help, juridical help, social help. Their families need help. We help them also to find a job. We even start to give them voucher to start up as small businesses. That's what we call ecosystem of humanity. That's how we step by step build this ecosystem against this polycrisis, against the problem that was created by war.
The video showed that, you're not just a medical center, you go beyond that, right? You're not just fixing one medical issue, and you're looking actually at things a little bit more holistically with what you just explained, just the connection of physical and mental health, and also just hope, right?
Yes, exactly.
How is the situation in Ukraine right now and with regards to hope? From the outside, very often it seems it's almost a hopeless situation, and then there's people like you that try to create hope every day and very practical solutions, but how is it if you're real with everybody?
I will tell you the truth, the situation is not good. We have anti-air alarms every day, every night. Our children spend half of their time in shelters, not in the school. So we still have this problem, and we need an enormous amount of help from you, from civil society, from all around the world. The things which I described, what we already done in our ecosystem of Unbroken, we couldn't done by ourselves. We call it peer-to-peer diplomacy. So we understand that our state is busy with fighting things. They just have this military stuff. We understand that this treatment, rehabilitation, reintegration, prosthetics on our shoulder. So we contacted many people in Ukraine and around the world and asked them for help. And we got this help. We got equipment, knowledge, financial assistance. So that's important. That's important for us, and thank you very much, and thank you for your nations for such help.
Thank you. Now, again, we still have this topic of the polycrisis. You already mentioned it. And, when preparing for the session, I was always struggling with, this academic concept of the polycrisis. And obviously, Ukraine had some real ways of showing that to us on how we are all connected to Ukraine, whether economically, emotionally, in many ways, right, to the war in Ukraine. But then people on the ground deal with real issues, with bombs being dropped, with war. So I assume on the ground, not many people are talking about polycrisis and how everything is connected, I'm assuming. But how do you see it? Do you think it's important to make the connection and zoom out and connect the dots between all these different crises, trying to connect them and solve them together? Or from your perspective in Ukraine, it's just more about we just need to help more people, we need to make sure that people get the mental health support, physical health support, prosthetic legs, etc. Is it just much more practical than that?
Well, it's a tricky question because everything is what you mentioned is important. I can tell when I start to serve in army, we had almost nothing, and I figured out that I can live without many things I used to. I can sleep on the floor, I can sleep on the street, I can sleep in the hall, and what is important is the human's life. That's the thing we should concentrate on. How to save human life. How to give to humans the opportunity to be humans. That should be core for everything. That's why we're talking about humanitarian solutions. And other type of crisis is just, top level. We need always concentrated on little things. It's my personal point of view.
How can we help in the room? How can people help that are not in Ukraine with your work?
Well, first of all, we are a charity organization, so I would ask you to donate as much as you can, and you will see result. We're showing this good result in our country. But also you can meet some people from Ukraine. Just find them, find your colleagues, find your peers in universities, in NGOs, in state organizations, in businesses. Just connect with them because they need your help, they need your advice, they need your just handshake, just saying, everything will be okay, we will help you. This costs a lot. This costs a lot.
How important do you see this kind of emotional support and this maybe less tangible support sometimes, where it's not just about arms being sent to Ukraine, but also people not giving up, right? Like there's real people on the ground that need to fight this war, and that we need to make sure that they're not giving up, and also that we work towards a solution, that we don't get stuck. So how important is that?
You know, sometimes intangible things are very important, and you can say how it's important, because it's hard to overestimate. Russia has everything more weapons, more soldiers, more everything. But we keep fighting. Why? Because our motivation is very high. And it's something you can touch. But you can feel it when you speak with soldiers, when you speak with field people, when you speak with NGOs. We have many NGOs who helps to arm it, who helps to solve humanitarian issues, to help to refugees, to help to IDPs, to help to those who wounded, to help to keep mental health. So we have such interesting organization, which become not hierarchical, but flat. All people decide we are equal. We have to help. Every help counts. Every step, every dollar donated, every smile, every let's keep up, never give up. So this is all counts.
Yeah, what is it about that resilience that I think Ukrainians have shown despite everything? And obviously, when we zoom back to when the war started, when Russia invaded Ukraine, most experts didn't give Ukraine much of a chance in terms of their assessment on how long you would be able to defend yourself. What is it about the resilience of Ukraine that, you know, we can learn from, or that's been like the pillar of strength in this very difficult situation?
It's a very interesting thing. It still be a miracle for us. We don't know how we did it, but we obviously survived yet. We endeavor those 2 years. And what we are doing, we are inviting our partners to discover with us what is the essence of this unbrokenness, what is the essence of this resilience. This started from Greater Manchester and Liverpool and Lviv. Those cities all together are initiated creation Unbroken Cities Network. So we invite cities who would like to figure out what gives to the city this resilience power, what helps to cities to stand in front of all these problems, such kind of humanitarian, military, any other type of crises. So we invite other cities to join our network, which has a goal to help to Lviv to build its own ecosystem and to share this knowledge. We are really proud that our ecosystem of Unbroken is a part of municipal healthcare and social care system, which means pretty much in every Ukrainian city you can make the same, which means pretty much in every other city we can do the same. And we're ready to share it. So in the beginning, we had a goal to help the wounded soldiers, and now our goal is help the wounded country. And to maybe become, it's another interesting fact. Because of war, Ukraine became an excellent center for military technologies. Many military things are just started in Ukraine. But we have to become excellent center in humanitarian solutions, which is much more needed in today's world. That's why we invited you to join us in this endeavor, to figure out what is unbrokenness and how to make this solution together.
Got it. Now, how hopeful are you actually that we're not going to sit here next year again and talk about the war in Ukraine, that there's going to be an end, there's going to be peace for Ukrainians? How hopeful are you? And if so, what gives you the hope?
Well, on this night, from Saturday to Sunday, there was a massive rocket attack in Ukraine, and on my region when I'm living on. And a couple of rockets and these drones, Shahed, just fly right under my home. And what could I do? I just pray, not me, not now. So this is what our hope is, to pray and do what we can right now with all resources what we have, right there in the situation what we have. No, I don't have silver bullet. I just have my head, my hands, my legs, my passion. That's all.
That's already a lot. I know we can all feel helpless sometimes, with the wars that we're watching from afar, most of us, and that you are much closer to. But before we wrap up this session, I think you brought us another video.
Yeah.
So I'd love to watch that as well, to give everybody a bit of an impression from on the ground. If we can play the second video for everyone before we wrap up, it'd be great.
Температура у 1300 градусів плавить сталь. Бетон можна зруйнувати вибухом. А вітер зі швидкістю 28 метрів на секунду ламає дерево. Людське тіло крихкіше за будь-який метал, бетон чи дерево, але у ньому є дух, який неможливо знищити. Тому ми незламні. Усі трагедії цієї війни мають імена. Вокзал у Краматорську – це родина Степаненків. Знищений Бахмут – Микита. Житлові квартали Сергіївки – брати Володимир та Яків.
Коли закінчиться війна?
Ракетні удари поруч з нашою лікарнею. Перші евакуаційні потяги лікарів без кордонів. Усе це досі перед очима. 100 поранених військових, яких привозять одночасно після обстрілу полігону. Ми не ходили додому і жили поруч з пацієнтами. Роман – один з тих 100. 68 днів лікування. Ігор, наш фізичний терапевт, поставив його на ноги. З Романа усе почалося. Сьогодні їх тисячі, незламних. Оксана – медсестра з Лисичанська, і її перші кроки. Михайло і його біонічна рука – наша перша. Сергій та Юля – наші Ромео і Джульєтта. Протезні майстерні – наша гордість. Спочатку менша, а тепер велика. До речі, це я, Назар. І лікарі, які приїздять з усього світу допомогти і навчити. А ще є центр ментального здоров'я і будинки для незламних матусь. А це місце мрій і надій. Місце перемоги над своєю травмою. Хтось був на Зміїному. Хтось не знімає балаклави. А хтось вирішив охреститися в лікарні. Сотні і тисячі неймовірних історій. Щодня ми разом протезуємо, реабілітуємо, лікуємо, оперуємо, розповідаємо історії, шукаємо кошти, будуємо і мріємо. Це наш місток у нове життя.
Thank you so much, Oleksandr, for sharing your work and for doing the work underground, to you and your team. And thanks, everybody, for being here. I'd like each of you to take a minute maybe after this and just think what's the one action that I took away from this session, whether that was earlier with our keynote, with our panel. What is one thing that you can do in your life? Heela shared a few things already that you can do. Thanks, everybody, for dedicating your time to this. And let's hope we're not back here next year or in a different setting where we're talking about rebuilding. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.